everyone, it's Mrs. Green, and we're going to continue our read aloud of The One and Only Bob by Catherine Applegate. So be sure that you have something to write with for your sketch notes, and make sure that you have some paper. We're going to start off with Alone, which was the last section that we had read, and remember that The One and Only Bob comes in parts. So this is part 1, and this particular section was called Alone. Catherine Applegate writes in short chapters, sometimes more of a free verse poem style. And this is kind of where the inciting incident happened. So a lot of you thought that the inciting incident was when Bob and Ivan had first met. Well, so that happened in the first story. So that means that's part of the backstory. So the inciting incident is more like the event that happens in this story that allows this story to take off, or the story will be really, really boring. So think about the couple of sections where he talked about things that never were discussed in the One and Only Ivan. So let's listen to this particular chapter that we left off on, called Alone. The truck happened without warning one night. They threw us in a box, left my mom behind. I can still hear her frantic howls. I landed in a muddy ditch. It was cloudy night, nearly freezing. Even the moon had abandoned me. And the smells. Everything so wild and unknown. Animals with big jaws and bigger appetites. Birds that swooped in to kill. Death and life all mixed up together. I searched for my siblings until the truth became clear. I was utterly alone. So Bob finding Ivan shows that he really wanted a friendship. So I'm also going to come to the assumption that probably in this story that part of the inciting incident, the parts that are making the story going, is the fact that he had felt alone once, or maybe he's going to feel alone again, only because this is the part of the story that we had not heard before. And maybe it's because it's becoming from Bob's perspective, just like we talked about in class. Point of view and perspective can be different depending upon the character. So we should read a little bit more just to make sure that we're on the right track. So the next few chapters in section 1 could be a little bit more information in your inciting incident or the backstory, the exposition part, but we could also be climbing into the rising action. So remember, the rising action of a narrative story are those events that are kind of exciting and get the story going and align with the problem. So that way when you get to the climax, that turning point, things are solved, good or bad. So let's continue on with The One and Only Bob. Make sure you have your pens and pencils and paper ready. This chapter is called Cars. The next morning I began my slow journey, moving through the tall, wet grass, my limbs stiff from the cold. Now and then, I drank from a mud puddle or gnawed on some grass. By evening, I was wobbly with hunger and thirst. I followed the highway. Every time a four-wheeled creature roared by, I froze in fear, and this is what slays me, I knew the cars meant humans, and humans meant the possibility of living just as much as they meant the possibility of dying. So you need to remember in the first read, he talked about how he couldn't believe that someone would toss away Bob and his siblings. Remember that had happened? He had gotten tossed on the side of the highway. So to him, he knows humans can be kind, but he also knows that he was mistreated. So I think he's a little indifferent, he has like an indifferent feeling when it comes to humans. He doesn't know how to feel about them. And remember, what he's talking about had already happened. So these are things that had happened to him in the past. The owl. Darkness had fallen when it came out of nowhere. The owl. A shadow in a shadow. They don't make a sound, Not a sound. It's quite impressive when you think about it. So think about it for a second. I'm gonna drink of water while I think about it. An owl. So what could happen to a small dog if an owl saw it? And he said, quite impressive when you think about it. Make a prediction. Okay, we'll see if you're right. So here's a picture of the owl that he's talking about. Luck. Just as her talons, those marvelous weapons, raked my fur, I caught my right foot in a small hole and stumbled. If she had gotten hold of my body, I wouldn't be here. But all that she managed to do was grab my tail. I was airborne, hanging upside down, dizzy and dazed, and just crazy enough to think, hey, I'm actually flying, before the terror hit full force. I caught a whiff of other animals below. Later I found out that they were pocket gophers, but back then I just knew I was smelling something completely foreign. The owl must have decided the gophers would make a more satisfying meal. She let loose her grip and I plummeted to the earth. I mean, falling really, really fast. More luck. Maybe it was the puppy fat or my soft bones or my incredible good fortune, but I didn't die. I didn't even break anything. I had flown twice in my short life and I lived to tell the tale. Will. I found a small hollow at the base of a fallen tree. I poked my nose and I got a swat and a hiss from a grouchy raccoon. Kept going, waddling, whimpering. Lights ahead, new strange smells. Kept going, kept going. It's amazing how much the sheer will not to die can keep you moving. So true. And I like that Catherine Applegate, the author, used repetition in this. Kept going, kept going. It really shows, the will that they had to keep moving. Exit 8. I finally came to a small road curving off the main highway. Exit 8 turned out to be a big billiard overhead had a picture of a terrifying animal on it. I bet you can guess what the terrifying animal was. Of course, I didn't know what the billiard was, didn't know the scary animal was a gorilla. If you guessed Ivan, you're probably right. Let alone that he would become my dearest friend. But something told me to follow the off-ramp. And eventually I ended up on the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, home of the one and only Ivan. History. I made it to the mall, slept in this dirty hay by some garbage bins. The next night I found this hole in Ivan's cage, stole his banana, slept on his belly, and the rest, as you say, is history. So remember, all that stuff that we read in the beginning was the backstory. For 2 years, I lived at that seedy old place that was a part mall, part circus, and all crummy. But that was nothing compared to Ivan. He spent 27 lousy years there. And our dear friend Stella, an old elephant, was stuck there for most of her life too. When Stella passed away, it nearly broke Ivan's heart. I tried like crazy to get him through those dark days. But what really saved him, I think, was Ruby, our baby elephant friend. If you read this story, you might remember Ruby. She's a great character. Before Stella died, Ivan promised her he'd get Ruby out of that awful place. And to my amazement, he actually pulled it off. Ivan and Ruby and a bunch of our other pals ended up going to different places in the zoo and sanctuaries and knew how to take care of them. They're with others of their own kind. And they're loved and well cared for. And it's been over a year now since we all moved, and they seem so much happier. So again, he's telling you the backstory of what happened in the one and only Ivan, just in case people who just jump into this book haven't read it, so they understand what happened and how their friendship has grown throughout the book. Let's continue on with the story. I lucked out. My girl Julia, whose dad had worked at the mall, decided her family needed a dog. Who was to argue? 2 square meals, my own bed, all the belly rubs I could beg for. What dog in his right mind would say no to that? The best part is, we don't live that far from Ivan and Ruby. I get to see them all the time. I'm glad they're nearby, and I'm thrilled they've settled in so well. Really, it's a solid solution, but it's not a perfect one. So why do you think that he is saying that it's not a perfect one? He's excited for his friends. Let's think about that one for a second and make a prediction. Okay, let's see if you're right. Tennis ball. The way I understand things, it's like this. We live on a lonely ball called Earth, and humans have basically been throwing it against the wall for so long that the poor old ball is falling apart. Let's do a text-to-world connection on this. What do you think the author is trying to say here, and how is he trying to connect this tennis ball metaphor to real life? Think about it, and if you have a good idea, you could always put it on your book snap and let me know what you think. Let's continue on. It's like me with a tennis ball, chewing away until it's nothing but a piece of slimy rubber that tastes like, well, slimy rubber. And that means there aren't as many places left for the wild animals. Seems there are good zoos and good sanctuaries and bad sanctuaries, just like there are good dog families and bad dog families. Good places are trying to keep wild species healthy and safe. They don't want endangered animals to go away forever. They also don't want the earth to turn into a slimy, dilapidated tennis ball. Although honestly, slimy rubber doesn't taste that bad. You should try it sometime. The thing is, I would give anything to see my dear pal Ivan deep in the jungles of Africa, where he was born. Or to see Ruby running across the savannah with a herd of elephants, her big ears flapping in the wind. I'd give up a mile-high pile of bacon cheeseburgers to see that happen. I really would. But it ain't happening, I get that, and so do they. When you're an animal, it helps to be a realist. What do you think a realist is? The word real is in it. Maybe if you have an idea for that, you could also write that in your book snap for this week. So now we have made it to part 2. And part 2 is going to be read to you next week, and that will be with a mystery guest. Someone who likes reading, who might want to read to the Jaguars. BMS. I wonder who it could be. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a great night, Jaguars.